Docs. Today here we have with us Miss Side. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm really excited to dive into our journey and learn more about your sustainable lifestyle. To start off, could you share with our listeners what first inspired you to embrace sustainability in your lifestyle?
Okay, so when I was around 16, 17, I went to Ireland and I could see that there was a culture of thrift shops and vintage shops and these kinds of things around. And I thought, this is interesting. Didn't really have that back in Malta. And so I got my first pair of purple suede monk boots, they were called. They were these
Really?
very odd looking shoes. And I was so happy because they were unusual. No one else had anything like them. And that was just so it was a very vain start to the thing of wanting
So
to
it
have
started
something.
from a very young age, like
Yeah,
this
no, yes, it's
inspiration
been
for
something
sustainability.
that was important for a long time. And
Okay.
my grandma um, was a seamstress. My mom taught me how to sew. All the people in my life, in my family, were very much aware of quality and trying to find quality things to wear, to use, right? Learning how to
Okay.
repair things. So it came from that.
Okay. So even your mom and your grandma kind of contribute to this in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they
So
did and they have.
what would you say? What would you define sustainability for yourself? How would you define it?
Okay, so it's a big word, right? And we hear it a lot, and maybe we're not quite sure what it means or how to apply it on an everyday kind of basis. I think for me, it means doing things in a way that makes sense to me as an individual and makes sense in the community that I live in, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, you want to ask something?
No, no, no. So and
Okay.
on a daily basis, what do you do to really make a change and really have a sustainable lifestyle?
Okay, so I think we talked about this a little bit in class. I I aim to go more towards a vegetarian diet, but right now I'm a pescatarian. And what I try to do in general is basically reduce the things that I consume, not just food, but also
Okay.
clothes and tech products and transport to reduce the impact. That's my
Okay.
presence on the planet has, right? So I don't have a car. I try to use public transport, use the ferry to get around, use the bus to get around. Obviously, it's usually in that order, right? Bus before ferry, but yeah, we're in Birgu, so we think of the ferry first.
Exactly.
Um, mm, um,
But
yeah.
as at the same time, do you still think it's worth it? Sometimes doing sacrifice for yourself over to, better the environment.
I mean, I think you also have to see that it suits you as a person, that you can do these things regularly as a person. So, for example, for me, ideally, I would be able to only buy my vegetables and my fruit from the farmers market, because I don't know if you know, there's a farmers market on Saturday mornings in Birgo.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
that's a way to be sustainable because there you're buying your produce that is local produce and is supporting local people who made your food, right? So in an
Okay.
ideal world, I always buy things from there. But the reality is that sometimes I need to go to Welby's or I need to go to the convenience store and get stuff that's not local. So I'm not supporting in that way these things.
Okay.
So
So you
it's just
typically
one
like to go for
example.
local as well, and you
Sorry?
typically like to go for local, so for local produce as well. And but how does that
Exactly.
really make a difference though? Because I'm not really getting how if it's local or not, because it's still the same type of food. So what's the difference though?
So let's say you want an orange, right? There's a
Yes.
difference between buying a kilo of oranges from, let's say, insert name of supermarket chain here, okay?
Yes.
And that's kilo of oranges might have been transported over from Sicily. So that 1 kilo represents not just the water and energy that it needed to grow in the orchard, plus the transport. You have to think of that transport. So something that's important if you care about the sustainability of what you're eating is to realize, okay, how far away from me was this grown? How much energy had to be used to transport it to me, to my table? So this is why I like to buy locally as much as I can. But even though we're on an island, so it's a bit difficult to do. When I lived in Brussels, it was much easier. There were farms that had a cooperative, a group of farms that worked together to deliver things that were grown within a few kilometers of Brussels itself. So you were always keeping things local. Things were fresh as well. They didn't need to be refrigerated for as long as they didn't need to be refrigerated in general. So it's it has an impact.
Okay, and as you're saying, there are a lot of factors if it's either local or not, and that impact the environment. So are there any negative stuff about doing buying any these type of food like on your health? Like is there any health like limiting your food or
No, I would say that actually it's probably better for you to eat what's local and in season, because when we eat things that are seasonal,
yes?
oranges, for example, are in season, right? Right now it's kind of coming to an end, but yeah. We're getting what we need. So what is an orange going to give me? An orange is going to give me the vitamin C to boost my immunity so that I'm okay to get through the winter. This is a very generic example I'm giving you. So when I'm eating something that's local, that's grown according to the seasons, my body is getting the mix of things that it needs specifically for that time.
And how you said about public transport, are there any other times that instead of public you might choose a taxi? Like, are those the same, would you say? Or
I do use car hailing services like Uber and Bolt and these kind of services. I find them convenient if I'm going somewhere that I know takes a bit of a long time to get to from where I am, or if I'm traveling at a time where, it's a bit late at night or whatever. So I'm not gonna lie, I do use them. Are they better for the environment? I'm on the fence about that. Also, not from the environment point of view, but from the way workers are treated. So I'm always a little bit concerned to make sure that the people whose services I'm using are being treated fairly, right?
okay,
Sorry?
I said so. You have to see that as well, and you don't just only care about the environment. You also see how other people are treated. How you saying?
Look, let's
Yeah.
go back to the idea of sustainability in general, right? For me, a way that is sustainable for me to live might not just mean the environmental impact. I want to make sure that all of my choices are choices that don't harm other people, which is a really big and dramatic thing to say and a very difficult thing to do. But I feel like for me as a person, it's very important that as much as possible, the stuff I choose to buy, the businesses I choose to support, even things like the technology I use, is not contributing to a situation where either workers are being treated badly, where natural resources are being exploited. Sometimes these big companies don't do due diligence of how the waste products of their factories are handled, right? So these are all things I keep thinking of when I make a choice to buy something or to try a service or to use a service. Nobody's perfect, but you can always, aim for these things if it's what you care about.
And are there any specific shops or supermarkets that you would recommend to any of our viewers?
I like going to Core Green in Santa Venera. it's a warehouse. She supplies, the lady who runs it, a lady called Natalie De Bono, supplies a lot of shops like Holland and Barrett's that you might have heard of, right? And other places as well, different businesses around the island. And she brings products that have this sort of ethos of making a careful choice behind them. Either they're fair trade, maybe you've heard of this phrase, fair trade.
Yes.
Or they're made in mind where they're better, or they're made in such a way where they're not as damaging for the environment. Because, for example, a lot of the chemicals we use in our houses, they're not ideal, right? Even the things like there are certain chemicals in toilet cleaners, for example, that can damage the ecosystem they get into later on.
Okay.
So I would recommend her. I know there's also Reroute in Balsan, but that has some interesting products, but I haven't been yet. Off the top of my head, those are the two I can think of.
Okay. So what do you enjoy most about joining local cleanups, how you said, or community projects?
I actually haven't ever done that. In fact, I was very surprised when you saw that when I saw that in your email. I thought, did I mention that? Did I talk about it?
There is. I thought you said that you like do some cleanups with your friends. I thought you mentioned that.
No, but I do know,
okay.
and I can tell you about groups that do that, and they even do cleanups in places like Kalkara, so in the Three Cities area, very close to school. And that's a group called Zibel. They have a very good name. I really like their name. And they do ocean cleanups. So they go out on a boat and they have different teams. They'll have people snorkeling, people diving and bringing things up, and then people on the shore sorting everything out. And sometimes they find tons and tons of stuff. It's pretty impressive. I follow them on social media. I kept planning to join, and there was always something else that happened. I'm very busy after school, so.
So have you ever, I don't know, ever doubted that you ever transitioned or from being living normal life or then being sustainable or?
There's no doubt, because it's not like not a non-normal life. I think many people are already doing a lot of the things I do, having a reusable water container, reusable coffee cup, all these kinds of things are very popular now, I think, which I think is a very good thing. I think people are more curious about being more careful with their choices and how they're spending their money. And I feel like people are starting to feel a bit ashamed when they say, oh, I got it from Temu, I got it for Shein, I got it from Amazon, whatever, right? Because we start to realize that, okay, these companies don't necessarily align maybe with our values, that we want, a green, safe, healthy earth for the future.
See.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but I don't see it as a not normal life.
So in fact, it's a very good life, and you have no regrets about it.
I mean, sometimes I do miss having a car. I'm not going to lie, I do miss it, especially because here Malta's a really big car culture. I don't know if you know people who have experienced living abroad and in many other places in the world. You can rely on the public transport in a way that's almost intuitive. You don't have to worry that it's going to pass by or not. It's there every 3 minutes. And it's obviously not the same here. So that I miss. I'm not going to lie. I miss having a car.
Well, there are some alternatives like purchasing an electric car.
They're quite pricey. Even though there are subsidies, there are government subsidies.
There are some grants as well. Although,
yes.
Well. So
I'm not ruling out that I won't consider it further down the line. I have looked at a few. I was also thinking of getting one of the electric scooters, the new electric scooters that had grants offered on them. But I have a problem with driving bicycles and mopeds and motorcycles. So it might be a bit risky.
At the same time, because I've heard that electric cars, they also are a bit of they also affect the environment's not in a so good way, how they're made and how the batteries get recycled. What's your opinion on that? Say,
Yeah. So
still,
if you're asking about the batteries,
yeah,
I'm not an engineer, so I can't really go into how everything is recycled. I don't know. But what I do know is it would be a major concern for me, because whatever we use is always going to involve some kind of process of consuming, right? Using it up. It's in the word. And the same goes for these type of electric vehicles. The battery has a life that will end. So we have to choose what makes sense for us, having this product and knowing it's consumable in a way that maybe means it's difficult to recycle. Or do we say, well, it would be nice to have it, but I'll choose to do something else and I'll choose to stick to my public transport or whatever.
okay,
It's a choice.
yeah, exactly. So, on a day-to-day basis, since you're an English teacher,
Mhm.
how do you bring sustainability into your classes, or do you at least try to something like that?
I mean, I
Or
try. You remember we tried the Mentimeter a few, like, was it last week? I think it was last week. Menti,
yes,
the website, instead of
yes,
doing
yes,
a
yes,
reading comprehension on paper. So
yes.
that's one way, right? A very, very simple example that I think is maybe useful to try as a teacher, to try to go paperless. But of course, if you're not using paper, you're still using a resource, because this is a resource as well. And the materials to make this are expensive and difficult to obtain. And so yeah, so it's being sustainable in one way, but how far is it really sustainable?
Exactly. And as well, I think you mentioned something about veganuary. You mentioned it to us as well.
Yes, we touched on this earlier. We mentioned it earlier. So the idea of not necessarily going full vegan, right?
Just
But
for the money,
reducing, yeah.
using. And in fact, I was with people, how he said last time, got inspired by it and actually stayed vegan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, according to
Um,
the article we read, that wasn't me. I
yes.
wasn't spreading any gospels. It was an article we read to discuss.
Yes. Um, do you ever face any challenges? And if so, how do you overcome them?
In the sense of making choices that are sustainable.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. I think the biggest challenge is the fact that we're on an island here. So access to the things we might want for our daily use. I don't know. I don't really want to give the example of electronics, but whatever it is, something that we want to order online, that we're generally used to ordering online. I think that's my biggest sort of frustration, that I think, I can't turn to that. Let me see what's on the local market. Let me see what's available locally. Because sometimes what's available locally is not as good as what's online. Sorry.
Fine, fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, not too big of a challenge, but still sometimes, like even if I know, you own a market chain or and you need to get import stuff from other countries, it might be a bit of a challenge for those types of people. Um, so what advice would you give to someone who wants to start living more sustainably?
Read, do your research, watch documentaries, um, also see if there are any influencers that you can follow who can suggest, different tips of how to, I don't know, for example, make your own products for whatever use that it is. Maybe, I don't know, you want to start making your own yogurt or your own peanut butter or your own face cream or whatever it is, right? There's a lot out there to help people get to that point. Um, I think yes, do your research and see what fits in your world and your lifestyle. Because I think what happens is a lot of people look at what's available online and get very, very overwhelmed, right? And then they sort of give up.
Because they try it and
So,
it's just not for them.
pardon?
So like they try it and it's not for them.
There's a difference between trying and giving up. You know what I mean? As in with trying and saying, oh, it's not for me, and giving up. So I think you can give yourself grace when there's a moment and you think, you know what, I really want to buy that thing online and I need it, so I'm gonna buy it. It's okay to have these one-offs as long as your choice at the end of the day is, I want my choices to reflect good things. I want my choices to bring good things in this world, you know, and good things for the future.
Okay.
That's
Have you
it.
ever? Sorry.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever attended an event or I don't know, seen a documentary or a talk, anything, or just change your perspective on everything, like about the environment?
I
Okay.
think probably it was a documentary from, I think it was 2010. Let me just Google the name.
Quite a
It was
time.
mainly about, sorry,
It's quite a long time with 2010, roughly.
quite a long time ago. Isma.
15 years.
Um,
Uh, time's passing.
I know time is passing, but you did ask something that inspired me. And I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so I've been
Actually,
interested in this a long time. We didn't talk about the stuff I do personally as a sort of practice. So, for example, I used to, when I was younger, I used to sew my own clothes. I used to knit and crochet my own clothes and accessories, and even to give gifts. That was something I used to do. So it was always, the idea was always to try to find local things, to try to reuse things. One of the things I used to do, for example, was take glass bottles and crochet around them to make vases and stuff like that. Okay, I found the name. It was called The True Cost.
the true cost.
The
Okay.
True Cost. And I can tell you exactly when it came out.
And what's it exactly about?
2015. It came out in 2015. So, The True Cost, really, it was not so much about sustainability and more
Mhm.
about workers' rights, which is something I care about a lot. So
Which you mentioned as well
basically,
about the workers,
pardon?
about how the taxes, how the workers get treated.
In general, because everything we
Generally.
use is produced by a worker. Whatever it is that you're wearing was made by someone. If you look at the tag, you'll see made in Vietnam, made in Cambodia, made in Bangladesh, made in China, made in Turkey, lots of different places. And one of the main points of this documentary, The True Cost, was that a lot of the things that we take for granted that we use in our daily lives, that we wear in our daily lives, they're made in less than ideal conditions, in contexts where people maybe aren't safe. Maybe the air in the factory isn't safe. There isn't a good ventilation. Maybe there aren't good fire safety procedures. You know, there are a lot of these things, and you think, well, that doesn't sound so bad on an individual level. There were moments in the past, and I'm thinking of the Rana Plaza disaster. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't. I haven't.
I think it's something that's covered in the documentary, but since I saw it quite a while ago, I'm not sure. But let me just refresh my ideas about it. So basically, what happened in 2013, so it was mentioned in the documentary since it came out in 2015, there was this complex with about 3 or 4 different factories that collapsed. The whole building collapsed. And because they
Oh,
didn't have the right procedures in place, because the companies didn't care about their workers and they didn't do due diligence, a lot of people died. It was about 1,134 people that died. These were people just trying to do their job, just trying to, sew the sweater that you're wearing together.
and where did
So
this happen?
this happened in Bangladesh
Okay.
in 2013.
So,
It's one example. There are many other examples of um, these kind of pivotal moments where something really dramatic happened and people started to stand up and take notice, right? So for me, that was very important, that I really cared that whoever made anything that I was using was getting paid well and was safe. And these are basic things, right? We assume that everybody is going to be safe and paid well. But the reality is that sometimes people aren't treated well, especially if they work in what we call blue collar jobs, which means when you're working with your hands, you know, like you're working in a factory or something like that.
Labor, basically.
Sorry?
Practically labor.
Yes, yes. Right. So because our society, for reasons that I will not go into, puts a different value on that kind of work than it would do, for example, on teaching or on, you know, running a company or whatever, even though we are all equally important for the society in my opinion, in the same way, to the same level. Because of that, you know, these type of situations can happen. Um, Personally, that was one of the biggest motivators for me to try to live a more sustainable life. Not necessarily just the environmental impact. I care a lot about the environment, but also very much about people not living in misery and not having hard lives just because they happen to be doing a job in a factory, just because they happen to be born in a different color, in a different country, sorry. But also, yes, I mean, there is that element as well. So
Yeah.
that's where it started for me with this documentary, The True Cost, that came out in 2015. It's helped me really commit to this idea.
Okay. Very inspiring documentary, how it seems.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there maybe a favorite quote or a message that keeps you motivated to live sustainably?
Mm. There's not just one. I mean, it's just, and also because I've been doing it for quite a while, I don't think about it so actively. It's like, sorry, it's like a choice I'm going to make. You know, I go into I go into a shop. I'm going to look at the ingredients and I'm going to see that I'm going to eat something that's good for me. If I have an allergy, I'm going to check. And it's the same thing with sustainability. If you care about sustainability, you're going to see that every choice you make is going to make sense to you.
Okay. So, okay. What changes do you hope to see in society to make sustainable living easier for everyone in Malta?
In Malta, specifically.
In Malta,
Mm, in Malta. To be fair, I think a lot of the changes I would like to see are already happening. So let's start on a positive note. That a lot of the positive that I was hoping to see would happen is already happening. When I moved away, which is almost 10 years ago now, Malta it wasn't where it is now, for sure, in terms of people being open to and interested in sustainability. And then when I moved back 2 years ago, well, almost three, again, I was very surprised that there were a lot of improvements. Okay, so a lot of
okay.
businesses that bring sustainable products, a lot of people actively practicing that. Like I see, you know, Chili's bottles and all that, reusable bottles. You know, you see people being more conscious of that, or people, because I think this is maybe more realistic to talk about as well, people having reverse osmosis installed in their homes to avoid using plastic bottles, um, and all these kinds of practices. Or, you know, all the grants that the government has given for people to have solar energy. My parents have solar panels at home, as in they had them installed and they got the grants. First it was a solar heater, and now it's actually powering their electricity. So these are real concrete steps that people are taking already to live more sustainably, and I'm very happy to see it happen around me already. I think what I'd like in my dream Malta is a shift away from car culture, because I think we are trapped and obsessed with our cars, and I think it would do so much for our mental health because of the stress of everybody getting stuck in traffic and looking for parking and all this stuff. For our finances, because we'd have more money to spend on things that we want to spend money on, and for our lungs as well, for our actual physical health. So
I
that would be my
completely
wish
agree
list.
with you. on that. But let's say we remove cars. Don't you think other problems would start to open? For example, I don't know, maybe we'd need another transport method. Like, I
Make
don't know,
one. There was a plan, I think, many, many years ago for a metro, but I think if I remember correctly, there were problems because of how many archaeological remains there are in Malta, because we know we have many, many years of history. And also, I think the water table in some places could be jeopardized. So
what do you
this
mean
is
water?
me trying to remember something I read a long time ago. So maybe let's not rely too much on that. But there's always an alternative. If we look around and we look at what different countries have done, one step in the right direction, for example, was making public transport free. That's great. But don't just leave it at that. Improve it as well, right? Improve the service in general. That's one step. If we look at other countries, for example, Singapore, it's another small country just like us. Something that they do to manage cars is that there are different days for different sort of groups of vehicles. And there's a cap, there's a limit on how many new licenses can be given. So if you, for example, turn 18 and you want to get a car, it's not as easy as that. You have to wait until your turn, you have to wait your turn to get your car.
Okay. But in Malta, any other, I don't know, ways apart from transports, maybe you could improve on?
I mean, I think we're working hard on improving the way we dispose of our waste. That's a good
Yes,
thing,
and
right?
well, we have now BCRS machines. Um,
I think
Makes
that's a
sense.
very good step in the right direction. I think, the way we're separating our waste, the way we're being encouraged to separate our waste is also very good. Um, I'm honestly trying to think of other things that maybe could be redone, but so far so good, I'd say. Just this thing about, reducing our reliability on cars, our reliance on cars.
Okay. Um, uh, how do you stay updated with new ideas or trends in sustainability?
I follow a lot of different people on social media. I uh, I have one person who I really like. I really just enjoy seeing what he does, even though I feel like it's not achievable for me because it takes a very different lifestyle to get there. I'll check his social media handle to make sure that I'm getting it right. I think it's Spicy Mustache. He is Italian. I think he lives in the UK now.
Spice Mustache.
I'll check. Yes, it's a guy called Alessandro Vitale. He lives in London, but he basically teaches how to make a bunch of stuff. So everything from your own marshmallows, how to grow your own things. It's zero waste. The concept is basically zero waste food, but also zero waste things for the house. And I
Okay.
think lately he was also showing how to, grow your own food and things like that. When I lived in Belgium, I had my own allotment. An allotment is a little piece of land that you can rent. In my case, it was for €8 a year, just €8 a year. I had my own piece of land. And in my case, I shared this with my neighbor. My neighbor was an awesome guy, this old Belgian guy who grew up on a farm. And it was like he was magical. He could grow anything, If he wanted to grow a pumpkin, it would grow to the size of, I don't know, like what size? Like what size can I compare it to? They'd be massive, like a casserole, right? Like a massive pumpkin. This was the person who I had to compare myself to, and I only managed to grow some beans, some strawberries, some rhubarb, which was already there, and some peas. That's literally it. So it was very sad to compare what I managed to grow to what he did. But then he had years of experience and he grew up on the farm and he helped me a lot. Because one of the rules on this allotment, which is like a communal garden, so you don't just have this one plot, there are lots and lots and lots of plots all together, everybody growing different things. One person just grew roses. She had just different colors of roses. That was the whole plot. Another person had a fountain that he built himself. Another person had fruit trees. So it's up to you to do whatever you want with this land. And so in that community, you sort of start to learn from the other people, and you learn how the insects interact with each other. You learn how the plants interact with each other. You learn what pests are around. Also because, again, this was always in Belgium, one of the rules was that we couldn't use pesticides. So we had no way to control or trap any of the slugs, any of the insects in general that were trying to eat our fruit. I can't
So
tell
what
you
would you
how
do about that?
frustrating it is. Sorry?
So what would you do about that? How would you counter that
This is the
issue?
thing. Then luckily I had my neighbor who would give me the tips and tricks. So one of the things to do when you have slugs attacking, for example, your strawberries, is to bury a little cup in the ground next to the strawberries with a bit of beer in it, and the slugs will go to drink the beer, and unfortunately they will drown in that beer. But you've gotten rid of the slugs, because I can't tell you how frustrating it is to go to pick a beautiful, perfect strawberry, turn around and find a little baby slug poking out of the hole, looking very happy that he's just eaten your strawberry. So it was a great experience, but it also got me into learning how to grow my own food and then following guys like Spicy Moustache. I also like to follow a lot of vegan chefs and vegan food and food inspiration accounts, right? I'm trying to think of, I think there's a chef called Max Lamanna. Again, I think he's Italian and lives in London, who has a lot of different recipe ideas. Again, also from a culture, from an idea of zero waste, of using, for example, all the parts of the fruit, not just the flesh of a fruit.
So when you say that, for example, like you use the peels of an apple, for example, like
I mean, I'm
oh,
telling you, this is
I don't know.
inspiration. That doesn't mean that in real life I'm doing all this stuff, because I don't have time. So I would love to. I would love to. And I also know that it's an excuse. I could make time to do it. But for example, things like sweet potatoes, I don't peel them. If I'm going to slice them up and put them in the oven, there's no point in peeling them. I like the skin on them. I wash them well, and then I put them in the oven. So it can be as simple as that, as simple as choosing not to peel a vegetable or not to peel a fruit and eat it with the skin. Or you don't have to go all the way to make, I don't know, a fancy type of sweet out of the skin. You can, there are people who do it, and you can look at them for inspiration, and you can say, oh, this weekend I want to learn how to make sweets out of apple cores or whatever. But I'm not saying it's possible, and it's probably not a good idea, because apple seeds contain either arsenic or cyanide, so be careful with that one. But the point is that you can choose to what level you try to adopt these things. But it's good to know that you can, that these things are possible. Something I did recently, for example, I wanted to make my own natural cleaning product. So I steeped the peel of clementines and oranges in white vinegar for a month. And then that you can use it as a surface cleaning spray, and it smells like citrus. So instead of putting like a citrus essential oil in the vinegar, the white vinegar that you might use to clean your house, you've got the natural source for it. All it takes is a bit of patience and planning.
Patience, all you need.
In everything.
What is one common myth about sustainable living that you would like to address?
What is one common myth about sustainable
sustainable
living? That you have to be perfect. That everything has to be perfect. That you have to do every single part of it. That it has to be perfectly right. Every little step you take in what is for you the right direction is important. It has to be the right direction for you, though. You don't do it because you think someone's going to give you a pat on the head and a gold star for being a good citizen. You have to choose to do it. And then it becomes part of your core values, and that's fine. Can you give me a moment? I need to switch on the light because it's getting dark.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay. Um, as you know, our school they have a gardening club.
yes.
Yes. Did you ever take part in any of the activities that they do, or
I spoke to Miss Malani about it this week, actually. It's something that's been on my mind since last year. Last year, the only way I could contribute, the club needed labels for their olive oil bottles, and I designed the label for them. But that's not really what I had in mind. I mean, I would have liked to join in a more practical way, also because, like I said, I had the allotment and I miss having the allotment. I miss the contact with nature, even though it's very different. In Belgium, you're dealing with different weather conditions, obviously. There are things that you cannot plant because they'll freeze, the frost will kill them, which is obviously not a problem here. So yes, I definitely need to speak to Miss Malani and find a moment. But this year, since I'm teaching IB, I'm a bit stressed out.
okay? Um, well, any other local projects maybe? I mean, I know that you didn't really participate, but many maybe any other local projects apart from Zibel, maybe you'd like to
That I
mention.
support.
Yeah, would like to support, like to follow.
I mean, I follow a lot of the local vintage and thrift community because I like what they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, I I like Friends of the Earth as a community, as an organization. I think they do a lot of good education and outreach as well. There is, I mean, there's which other group am I thinking of? Friends of the Earth have a lot that overlaps with what I've been talking about. So even for example, they have a booklet that's all about the concept of foraging, which is when you find things to eat or things to cook with from outside, just the wild, right? So there's a book. Actually, let me go and get it because I have it here. I can show
Okay.
it. Edible Plants of Malta. So this was published by Friends of the Earth in collaboration with ERA, that's the environmental agency of the
In
government.
fact, that book was given to us in last year's science fair.
There you go. So
At,
you know about it, right? You know about it. So I find a very interesting concept that we have to remember that we do have access to these things. It's something that maybe our grandparents or our parents can tell us about, but it's nice to also have the resource, to have a book that we can take along with us on our walk and say, oh, nice, this is a nasturtium. This is edible, right? For example. You can see this on your way if you walk between Kalkara and Virgo, there you see lots of this right now.
okay.
So I feel like Friends of the Earth are a good organization to follow or to know about. Zibel as well, like we mentioned. Yeah.
Okay. Um. So.
I'm probably forgetting others, but that's the
But
nature
all
of
of those
of
that
an
you
interview.
mentioned, they're Malta or like apart, like
Sorry,
outside of Malta.
could you
Those are
repeat?
in Malta. Those are in Malta or like outside of Malta. So
Friends of the Earth are international, but they also have a branch in
yeah,
Malta.
yeah. Okay. Because to be honest, I never ever heard on any of those like the Friends of Earth, but have heard of Zippel and Era, but the other have never heard of it.
Well, you have because
Um,
they gave you that booklet.
yeah, for Era I have.
Yeah, but look,
Yeah,
Friend of the Earth. That's the
uh,
organization I'm talking about.
but I guess I never saw it on the back.
Trid toqgħod attent. Daw id-dettalji importanti. I'm joking. Imma you get what I mean. So this type of organizations, they do a lot that's very much aligned with what we've been talking about. Even they organize swaps where you can go with I think 5 clean clothes and exchange for Others, I think they've started organizing repair cafes. I don't know if you know this concept. It's where you go with something that needs to be fixed, and hopefully there's someone there who can help you fix it. So you can do, for example, you can do this with bicycles, sewing machines, these kinds of things that are expensive and that are used a lot, and that it's valuable for us to learn how to repair them.
Would you say, I don't know, purchasing from thrift stores, is that really a good way to contribute to living a better life, just being sustainable?
Living a more sustainable. Well, I mean, what you purchase there is stopping you, I guess, from buying it from a big chain that would maybe have all these conditions that we're talking about, where the workers aren't treated very well or whatever, right? So that's the first thing. A lot of people would argue that what you should try to do is try to live with less and don't buy anything in the first place, which we all know it's a little bit difficult to do. We're all human, and we as human beings, we love novelty. We love having something new. We love that shiny new feeling, the shiny new smell. So this is very normal. So I think it helps to help people feel good, feel like they've given themselves something nice without necessarily damaging the environment. Because we remember we're stopping that piece of clothing from going into the landfill. Fashion is, I think, the second or third biggest polluter in the world. And it's not just what goes into the process of making the clothes, but also the end of life of those clothes, which is why it's so great when you see people upcycling, reusing fabrics, and also or learning how to repair their own clothes. This is something that I care about a lot. At my school in Brussels, I used to teach my students how to sew, but not how to sew, how to repair their clothes. So let's say you have, a hem in your pants that needs to be taken up. I could teach people how to do that. Or there's a hole along one of the seams. I could teach people how to do that. We had a school sewing machine, and we were learning how to use that to repair our things that we love having, or how to remake something as well.
Okay. What would you tell our viewers to stop doing to try and make a better impact?
Could you repeat the
Sustainable.
question, please?
What would you tell our viewers to stop doing to make a better impact on the environment?
Stop thinking that it disappears when you throw it away, or stop thinking that it just appears out of nowhere on a shelf. Start to think about the lifespan of everything you're using. And that maybe will give you a bit more respect for the things that you have around you and the things that you own. That's
Fair
it, I
enough.
think.
But for example, these biodegradable products, well, I guess they are a better alternative to some other products. Throw them away. Are they like you said? Do they still stay there, or since they're biodegradable, they actually do?
Um, I
Um,
don't really have a good background in this. I don't know enough. I'd rather if you ask maybe someone who has a science background and knows more. But what I do see is that what I would prefer is to avoid buying the biodegradable version and just don't buy anything at all, right? Find another thing that you can use for whatever it is, right? So let's say you're planning a party and you want disposable cups, and you get like disposable bamboo cups. That's great, but what I would rather you do is you get your glasses that you have at home and you wash them after you use them, right? It's much easier. It sounds like it makes more sense as well, because it does. So I would encourage people to think of what they already have before they go ahead and buy the fancy biodegradable or easy to recycle version.
So to finish off, what is one key lesson about sustainable living you want our listeners to remember?
Um, I think it's a choice you have to make if you feel it aligns with your personal values. So if you feel like you want to be someone who shows up in the world and cares about the choices that they make and cares about the impact they have on the environment and on the people who are making the products they use, then it's it's a no-brainer, right? It's going to be obvious to you that you want to make these choices, that you want to live life a bit more consciously.
Okay. Anything else that you would like to add?
Well, thank you for inviting me to talk. I feel like I went on and on and on. I hope you got the questions that you wanted to ask in.
Yes, yes.
Do you have any other things that you want to ask or say?
Not at all. We covered everything. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, if there's one thing that I can ask, would
Yes.
you consider doing any of the things we talked about?
Well, honestly, yes, but
Good.
I just might not have much time, but I can make time.
You're in a position where time is you already have quite a lot of time. It's going to become a luxury further down the line. So try to ease into it if you want to make it part of your life. Try to start now, yeah?
I will, I will.
Okay. Well, thank you, Zain. That was really nice chatting.
Thank you, Miss Side. Um, have a nice day. Bye bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.